In the freezing dark, 1,000 meters below the surface of the Earth, time feels different. Every second drags, every breath counts. The walls of solid limestone don't just echo your voice, they remind you just how far you are from sunlight, from help, from life itself. At exactly 11:44 a.m. on June 19, 2014, a stretcher emerged from the gaping mouth of Germany's deepest cave. Attached to it was a man who had spent nearly 2 weeks in a place no one ever expects to survive, let alone be rescued from. And what it took to get him out was unlike anything Europe had ever attempted before. It all began on June 7th, a Saturday. In Bavaria, near the Austrian border, lies a cave that doesn't just intimidate, it devours. Riesending. In German, it literally translates to giant thing, and it lives up to the name. More than 1,000 meters deep and nearly 20,000 feet in total mapped length, Riesending is no tourist attraction. It's an unforgiving network of vertical shafts, narrow chimneys, freezing underground rivers, and complete darkness. 3 people entered that day, among them Johann Westhauser, a 52-year-old physicist and speleologist. But Johann wasn't just a visitor, he was one of the people who helped discover parts of this very cave. He knew its dangers better than most. Years of experience had taken him through the depths of the earth before. But this time, something would go terribly wrong. What made Johann stand out wasn't just his technical knowledge, but his sheer dedication to understanding one of Earth's most inaccessible frontiers. He had logged countless hours underground, mapping caverns others wouldn't dare approach. This wasn't some casual weekend trip. It was a continuation of years of committed scientific exploration. The cave, known for swallowing light and distorting time, was a place Johann respected deeply. He often said that the cave doesn't forgive mistakes, it simply waits. And Riesending wasn't just a cave, it was alive in its own way, breathing cold drafts through narrow passages, echoing distant water drips like whispers. Johann and his team had prepared meticulously. Ropes, helmets, food supplies, communication systems. Everything was double-checked. They knew the terrain could shift at any time, that even a single misstep could change everything. Yet they pressed on, because this was more than exploration. It was passion and it was purpose. They planned to stay for days, to push further, to document more of the unknown. As they descended deeper into the belly of the mountain, their voices quieted. Every sound began to matter. The crunch of boots on gravel, the soft clink of gear, the heavy, muffled stillness of the world far beneath our own. Down here, light doesn't reach, and the only clock is your heartbeat. For Johann, this cave held mysteries he couldn't resist. But that very curiosity was about to be tested like never before. Sometime after midnight, early on June 8th, while the group was around 1,000 meters into the cave, disaster struck. Out of nowhere, a rockfall. There was no warning, no rumble, just a sudden impact. A rock came crashing down and struck Johann on the head. He was wearing a helmet, but even that wasn't enough. He suffered a traumatic brain injury. In any regular setting, that would already be serious. But this wasn't regular. This was a pitch-black maze, a kilometer beneath the surface. And they had no way of calling for help. No radios, no cell signal, nothing. Immediately, the team sprang into action. One of the 2 colleagues stayed behind with Johann, monitoring him, keeping him conscious and trying to prevent further damage. The other began what would become one of the most grueling solitary journeys imaginable. A 10-hour climb through vertical shafts, slippery rocks, narrow squeeze passages, and freezing cold water for 10 hours straight. No assistance, no light but a headlamp, just a single person crawling and climbing their way toward the surface to get help. It's hard to fully grasp what that journey must have felt like. Every muscle in the body strained, hands blistered from gripping wet ropes and jagged stone, knees scraped raw from tight passages no wider than a person's chest. At times, the path demanded crawling face first through water, where one wrong move meant slipping back several meters. The cold seeped in with every step, biting at the skin, numbing the fingers, making every small task feel monumental. There was no time to rest, no option to stop. The adrenaline pulsed hard, but fear rode alongside it. Fear of getting stuck. Fear of making a noise that could trigger more rockfall. Fear of not making it out at all. But quitting wasn't on the table. Above ground, Johann's life depended on this climb. That kind of pressure can break people. But this climber kept going, fueled by urgency, determination, and the silent promise not to let his teammate die in the dark. Every corner turned felt like a small win. Every flicker of reflected light on the rocks gave hope. And when that first whisper of daylight finally broke through, it wasn't just sunlight, it was survival. That call for help triggered what would grow into the largest cave rescue operation in Germany's history, and one of the biggest the world has ever seen. By that evening, 3 cave rescue teams had already entered Riesending. 11 people in total, and their mission was clear: get to Johann, assess his condition, keep him alive, and begin planning a way to get him out. It sounds simple on paper, but inside the cave, nothing is simple. Even reaching Johann took days. The terrain was so technical that every movement forward needed careful rope work, anchor points, and safety protocols. This wasn't just about a rescue, it was a life-threatening mission for everyone involved. Back on the surface, news of the incident spread quickly. More teams were brought in from Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Italy, Croatia. Eventually, over 700 personnel would be involved in the rescue: cave divers, medics, engineers, speleologists, logistics teams, helicopter pilots. Everyone had a role to play. But the cave didn't care. It remained cold, unstable, relentless. To even begin the rescue, a communication system had to be set up. They used something called a cave link system, which allowed basic text messages to be transmitted through solid rock. This was essential. It meant the teams at the surface could finally start receiving updates from deep inside. Still, even with communication in place, the challenge was monumental. It wasn't until June 11th, 3 days after the accident, that a physician finally reached Johann. His name was Dr. Martin Guxu. He had to endure the same grueling descent just to get there. He examined Johann and confirmed it was a mild traumatic brain injury. Not life-threatening, but serious enough to require a specialized rescue. The fact that a doctor was able to reach Johann at all was a feat in itself. Dr. Guxu wasn't just any physician. He was specially trained for cave rescues, someone who understood both the science of the human body and the brutal mechanics of the underground world. He had to carry not only his own gear, but also medical supplies through twisting, narrow corridors and across slippery ledges. Hours of rappelling, crawling, climbing, and squeezing through gaps barely wide enough to breathe in. When he finally arrived, Johann was conscious but fragile, his speech slow, his body exhausted. Every movement had to be done with caution. Even checking his pulse or examining his pupils became a calculated effort in that environment. Dr. Guxu had to make decisions not in the comfort of a hospital, but while perched on cold rock surrounded by complete darkness, in air thick with moisture. Soon, another physician joined, descending through the same nightmare path. Together, they didn't just evaluate Johann, they stabilized him. Medications were administered, hydration managed, vitals tracked. In that damp, silent chamber a kilometer underground, it was the closest thing to an emergency room the cave had ever seen. But getting Johann medically stable was only step one. The bigger question still loomed: how do you move someone with a brain injury through miles of hellish terrain without making things worse? Another doctor arrived later that night. Together, they decided Johann could be moved. But to do so, they'd have to adapt the cave, literally. Passages had to be widened, ropes secured, footrest installed. In some places, they had to drill into the rock to create new paths. And all of this had to happen while dozens of people lived inside the cave for days at a time. Bivouac camps were set up underground. Think about that for a second. People were sleeping, eating, and working in a pitch-black cave system, meters below the earth day and night, for over a week. At peak times, up to 60 people were inside the cave at once. That's not just coordination, that's devotion. But even with preparation, the actual transport would test them all. The stretcher was custom adapted to minimize shock. It was padded and reinforced, but it still had to be carried manually. No machines could help. Engines can't operate in that kind of enclosed, oxygen-limited space. Everything had to be done by hand. And then came the vertical passages, the shafts, the climbs. Here's where the operation turned into something extraordinary. In those steep vertical sections, the rescuers had to use their own bodies as counterweights. Imagine that. One group descends, tied to the stretcher, while the other group climbs, pulling upward using only their muscle power, balancing the stretcher like a giant human pulley system. It was dangerous. Every move had to be calculated. If one person slipped, it could end in tragedy. Over 11 days, Johann was moved inch by inch, foot by foot through the cave. Supplies were continuously sent down. Food, water, medical gear, rope, batteries, all hand-carried. Every item had to be hauled up and down the same path over and over, and the cave took its toll. The temperatures were cold, the air was damp, equipment broke, people got injured, but no one stopped. Then came the final challenge, the infamous 180-meter vertical shaft. The last climb to freedom, the narrowest, steepest part of the entire system. The rescue team took a deep breath and began the final ascent. Ropes were checked, anchors reinforced, communication lines opened. Slowly, using the same human counterweight system, Johann was lifted. Every meter gained was a small victory. Tension hung in the air. And finally, at 11:44 a.m. on June 19th, Johann saw the sky again. After 12 days underground, he was winched out of the cave and immediately transported by helicopter to a trauma hospital in Murnau. He was alive, conscious, stable. It was a moment of triumph for Johann, for the rescue teams, for everyone who had watched with bated breath as updates came trickling in day by day. But the story doesn't end there. In the weeks that followed, the rescue made headlines around the world. People marveled at the coordination, the bravery, the endurance, but they also asked hard questions. The total cost of the rescue was nearly 1 million euros. Who should pay? Eventually, the Bavarian Interior Ministry announced that Johann would be contributing a substantial amount to the costs. He agreed, and most people supported the decision, recognizing both his responsibility and the incredible efforts that saved his life. In the aftermath, something else had to be dealt with, something few had thought about in the moment: trash. More than 1 ton of it. Food wrappers, batteries, medical supplies, ropes, drill bits, everything left behind in the cave during the rescue. It took another 6 years to get all of it out. The cleanup was completed by 2020, an effort crucial for the fragile cave ecosystem, where pollutants could threaten groundwater and disturb species like bats that rely on the cave's stability. And as for the cave itself, it's no longer freely accessible. After the rescue, authorities sealed off the entrance. Now, only individuals with specific permits, those with professional qualifications, a valid reason, and proven physical ability can enter Riesending. Johann, the man at the center of it all, made a full recovery, and by 2016, he was once again exploring caves, cautiously, quietly, but with the same passion that had brought him to Riesending in the first place. What happened inside that cave wasn't just a rescue. It was a display of unity, endurance, and belief in human life. Across nations, across fields of expertise, people came together to defy the odds. And they won. If stories like this keep you on the edge of your seat, you know what to do. Subscribe, like, and hit that bell so you never miss another survival epic. And check out our other dramatic rescue stories only here on the channel.